you are an artist. You are a channel. You are intuitive. You have every gift. There's not one person listening to this that I am not absolutely certain does not carry any of these qualities. So don't shut this thing off because you think, oh, I'm not intuitive. I'm not psychic. I'm not guided. I'm not an artist. You are.
What is up, everyone? Welcome back to my channel. I'm so excited to share this next video with you, which is a conversation I had today with one of my very, very favorite people. Tiffany Pratt is a visual artist. She's a creative director and an interior designer. What not everybody knows about Tiffany, though, is that she's also a very deeply spiritual person with a devoted spiritual practice. And so today we had a beautiful conversation about the connection between spirituality and creativity. So I hope you enjoy this amazing conversation with the one and only Tiffany Pratt. Tiffany Pratt, what is up? What is up?
Tiffany, we're doing it. We're doing it. I feel like the way we met and the way our relationship continues to evolve is a wonder. And I am so grateful for you. And thank you for the beautiful prayer that you just shared, because I just love hearing you in that grounded state of your special essence that I think is so magic. And I'm so happy to see your face and your purple room and be with you. So,
thank you.
I love you, KB.
I love you
and
too.
And your heart chakra tattoo?
Well, it's speaking out my heart chakra.
I love it.
Yeah, Tiffany hadn't seen this latest, addition to my art collection on my body. So here it is, just making an appearance.
I love it. I love it. I want to make you a whole bunch of ripped t-shirts so we show it.
I will accept those with gratitude. But anyway, sister, I feel like when we met, there was just this explosion of magic. And when I think about that, I think about the fact that where we really connect is on these two topics that are so dear to our heart, which is creativity and spirituality. And so that's why I was so excited to have this conversation on this day, because I thought, this is something that we can definitely talk about. It's something that's so needed right now to reach the artists and the creatives in the world. So I wondered if we could just start by talking about this connection between spirituality and creativity, and what are your thoughts on that? Let's talk about that to start.
It's the most beautiful, it's a beautiful entrance point, because I don't believe that there is a division between spirituality and art or creativity, because divine source works through all of us, and everyone that says that they're not an artist is not true, because we're all creative beings and we're all creating things all the time. And there's a misconception that because it's not paint, or because it's not something that we would classify as an art material, that it's not art. But everything that the human does is artistic and beautiful and creative. And I feel that if anyone does indulge in their creative spirit in any capacity, there's always that space between that you arrive in, and it's sort of like timelessness. And you feel like you don't know, you're not in your mind thinking, oh my God, is this good? Do these colors work? All of those earthly things just kind of go away, and you're left with your hands, your mind, your materials being guided. And so I think that's why I have always loved creating, because to me that's the most peaceful place, and that is the most heavenly place. So you can just kind of let it all go away and do something for the sake of doing it. And I think we can get into this later, but people, humans, beings on this planet always feel like something has to have a purpose, it has to have an end. There has to be a completed something in order for it to have purpose, or in order for it to be good. And the whole purpose of creativity is certainly not for product. It's the process of being state, in that material, in that moment. And whatever comes of it is wonderful, even if you don't think it's good, because it's serving its purpose by just being. I always have said in my creative process and when I facilitated art for others is that it's the process of creating over the product of what we create. And that is really hard for people to get through because we're always hoping that what we're going to make is what we think is good or something that maybe we've seen somewhere else and we want it to look this way, and we add and attach so many things around the product versus understanding that us just taking time and touching and being with our two hands in whatever material we choose is all.
I love it. You're speaking my language, because one of the things that comes through repeatedly through this guide that I'm channeling is how we are not here to achieve things or to accomplish things as much as we are here to emanate an energy. And I feel like that's kind of what you're saying in terms of the creative process, is that when you're in the creative process, you are experiencing that energy. It's starting to come through and you're experiencing that through whatever you're doing. Does that make sense to you?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Because everything is a resonance. Each of us carries an energy and a resonance. And we're like little spongy bodies of water that are taking over, whatever is around us or whatever we subject ourselves to. And that is in the work. I believe that when you're doing something in tandem with spirit, someone could look at the work and not necessarily understand what they're feeling, but they're feeling the essence of what was present, that person, all the molecules in the room it was made,
yes,
the hand touching that paint.
Yeah.
It's a very, to me, life and the things around us is a very energetic experience.
Yes, definitely. 100%. Well, I have some books around me. I have your book here, but I have this book here.
Yes.
Bible.
Yes.
This is The Creative Active Way of Being by Rick Rubin, a music producer, kind of like our creative Bible next to The Artist's Way.
Artist's Way. Yes. Those are the two. Those, if anyone out there is wondering, needing, wanting, curious, like, how do I get started? What's happening here? These are the books. And I think when you first asked the question, about spirit and creativity, Julia Cameron bridges that gap so beautifully in the book, The Artist's Way. And the more you read it, the more I've done The Artist's Way now, I don't know how many times. I still do my morning pages.
Yes, amazing.
And it's just, once you get into that, then you step over to Rick Rubin's world and you're like, someone gets it. Like Rick Rubin just, when I read his words, like my energy just goes,
like, well, and that's partly his energy coming through too, because if you see him interviewed, it's so clear that he is not creating for an end result, that he's creating for the sake of creating. Well, I mean, his book is called A Way of Being, so that's pretty clear just from the title of the book. But don't you feel that energy kind of coming through, and how huge is that for any creative person to step into that for themselves and to see it as a present moment thing, not like a future thing? Right. Which is, I think, where a spiritual principle comes in, because it's that present moment awareness, that detachment from the outcome, like all of these kind of classic or basic spiritual principles coming in to illuminate our creative path.
Oh, 100%. And I think in tandem to what you're saying, to think of Rick Rubin and his presence and his speech and everything he says is born of him being deeply engrossed in creative collaboration. Creative collaboration is all the man has ever done. There's a selflessness to it because he is not interested in it being his. He's not interested in putting his name on it. It's not, for him, it's not about him owning the work. It's about him being a part of and assisting in the blossoming and holding space for and asking curious questions around how whomever he's collaborating with could be their best self or show their best self or be their truest self. I think that that's what is the most beautiful thing about the book, and something that I love the most is that so often when people feel like they're creating something, they get personally very attached to it, and they want to and they feel like, oh, it's my name, it's my work, it's my blah, blah, blah. But it's actually not.
Yes. Tiffany. So true. Probably the biggest, most magical thing that anyone could awaken to is that, what you just said.
Yeah, it's not you.
No.
It's not your. So as soon as you can let that out of the cage and let that fly free, then whatever you spew forward, you're less attached to the outcome even more, because you understand that it's something that needs to be birthed and be put out into the world in whatever capacity. For me, sometimes it just ends up being, ripped up cards that I give to my friends. Who cares? Like
coffee filters.
my love for the coffee filters. I mean, whatever's white that I can get my hands on that's paper-like, look out, mother, because it's going to get painted on. So I love that you brought the tools out, and I love that you're sharing those books, because I think that those are perfect. Those are perfect for anyone watching.
Well, and I was just thinking of what I just said, being like, oh, I'm doing some channeling now, but just in accordance with what you just said, it's like, if you are an artist, you are a channel, you are a vessel, you are a space for the universe to create through. So do you have any words of advice of how to detach from maybe that piece about how something is going to be received by the world when you're working so hard on your creation and you finally release it? That can be a difficult venture for the creative, for the artist.
My brain just went like, so I have 3 shoots to hit from. The first shoot, I have to say, is anyone out there listening, you are an artist, you are a channel, you are intuitive, you have every gift. There's not one person listening to this that I am not absolutely certain does not carry any of these qualities. So don't shut this thing off because you think, oh, I'm not intuitive, I'm not psychic, I'm not guided, I'm not an artist. You are. And you haven't given yourself maybe enough space and time to dig through the middle. So that's the one thing I have to say that's really important, because a lot of people love to label themselves, and I really don't like labels, because I don't think we are anything. We are just balls of light shooting through a weird rocket in space right now. So there's that. The other thing that I thought when you were asking the question, I taught for many years children and adults in my own art studio. So I've had thousands of hours watching the creative experience unfold. And I found my adult classes were more challenging than my children's classes, because as children get older and as they turn to teen and adult, you start to quantify what you believe is good or bad. And motor skills, like anything else, if you're not actively using your 2 hands, aren't always going to produce the way you want them to. And so what I would do as children or adults would get older and more self-conscious is I would find the dirtiest material I could and get them to play and make whatever came out shape-wise. So big, chunky, huge pieces of charcoal and huge pieces of newsprint. And it was just, I was like, go fucking nuts. Like, just swirls and shade and anything that comes up, and just next one and the next one and the next one, just go for it. So we would do these, I would kind of call them warm-up exercises. And the best part was that the charcoal would be all over their hands, all over their clothes, all over their face at the end. And that was the beautiful mess that I wanted them to grow accustomed to being in. So then to take over to the third place that my brain went to, which is often when you are involved in the creative process, in my experience, people get in their own way because they're telling themselves, the ego jumps in and says, it's not good enough. No one should see this. This is not done. And so 2 things happen is the creative person will overwork the piece till it's disintegrated to nothing, so it really cannot come into the world. Or it sits there and it never really gets completed because there is a fear. And the greatest gift we can give ourselves as creative people is to do something until we feel like it's run its course through our being, and to understand that it's an offering, as Rick Rubin would say, or as, Marianne Williamson would say, that, your audience, your friends, your family, the people around you who love who you are, your ministry will appreciate what you're putting forth. And not necessarily to say it's good or bad, just to see that you are expressing yourself. I've talked so many times to so many students, and the hardest thing that everyone has challenges with is completion and seeing things through. And if all you do is just take something all the way to the end until you could just kiss it goodbye or burn it or give it or sell it or anything, that's the greatest part, because then you're not holding on to something. It's not latched onto you. You're not feeling like you're carrying something unfinished around, and you could open up and move freely to the next thing. So that was a long-winded answer, but hopefully all of that made sense.
No, I love that, because when you're talking about the difficulty in completion, I think the first thing that came to my mind with that, because I've experienced that, is this notion of perfectionism, where it's not good enough yet, which comes from that old tape in our minds that it's not just that, creatives have that, but I think almost everybody has that not good enough tape in our minds. And so if you allow that, this is where maybe we'll get into talking about the benefits of spiritual practice and meditation, because as you start to realize that that's not necessarily your voice, that's just a voice, right? That's influencing you, the more you can let go of that, I feel like the easier it will be for you to unleash your creation, because it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be an expression. And if you wait for something to be perfect, you probably will never release anything. The other thing I want to mention too is that there's a writer that I follow online who talks a lot about the creative process. And one thing I love about her is she talks about this phase that we go through where our work is cringy, and it's like a necessary phase of experimentation where maybe what you're creating is a little bit cringy, but you have to go through that as a phase of experimentation before you realize what it is that you like, or develop some sort of skill or style or whatever. So just noticing, I guess, the thought forms in your mind that you're listening to that aren't necessarily true, that might be limiting your creativity. That makes sense.
Well, I think you're bang on saying that, because we're going back to the same programming of what the world is telling us is beautiful. And a lot of artists who are really free are sometimes the biggest, most reformed perfectionists that have really tried to say, I have really taken it too far and now I'm just letting it fucking rip. But then the other side of this most important thing is the fact that when we're creating something and we put something out into the world and it is like you would say ugly, it goes through this ugly phase. You said that you would see my art in a lineup and know it's mine. And a lot of my stuff gets ugly, most of it. And my solution to the ugliness is to fucking keep going. And more until it looks like you don't even know what you're looking at. And that is always the creative humans who work with me on a regular basis. That's their joke, is that they've learned how to work with me when they're helping me execute something, and I'll go and I keep saying, keep going, because it's not there yet.
More glitter.
More than anything, more paint, more fabric, more trim, more glitter, it doesn't matter. So we all find, I think the reason I'm bringing that up is I find a childlike juiciness to extra, to maximalism. It feels like the physical representation of something being dumped out. And so I implore anyone listening to hit that stage of ugliness and lean into their aesthetic solution to how they will turn their trash into treasure.
100%. It reminds me of when I was studying to be a recording engineer, And one of my teachers, we were in the studio one day, and I'll never forget this because he was just talking about how he would be in the studio, and the client would come in to listen to the final mix or whatever, and if there was any kind of doubt whatsoever from the client, he would just turn up the overall volume. Like, that was his solution. So he'd be like, okay, just a second, just give me a second. You just turn it up like 10 dB and then play the exact same thing again. 9 times out of 10, the client would be like, yeah, I like it. It's good.
Yeah, that's really good.
Volume.
But that's it.
Yeah.
That's it. It's just like you kind of already got yourself to a certain place. And so just keep
going.
Doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Keep 100%. Going. Don't stop now.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
And that's the feeling of I think it's sort of the other, we're talking about spirit. So sometimes you're in conversation with spirit in this creative process, and then things are feeling real good. And then something will come in and take you out of it or distract you. And sometimes that's the place where the art ends up stopping because you kind of got out of conversation. So this is where a spiritual practice, I think, is really important because, you hear in lots of different stories of different creative people who say, the muse has come to visit me in the middle of the night. And so I wake up at 3:00 in the morning and I follow the muse, and everyone has a different way of naming what's guiding them, but finding your muse, spirit, God, source, guides, connection, you'll know when the time is right. And half the time for me, it's always when I'm in my pajamas. I do more painting in my pajamas. Braless, all my pajamas are schmutzed with paint. That's when I do my best work.
That's amazing. So let's talk about spiritual practice, because I'm feeling like that's an important part of this conversation. Let's talk about your spiritual practice, and let's talk about what that is and how you have, because I'm sure there was a point in time where you probably didn't have one, and now you do. I'm just making that assumption. I'm curious to know how the introduction of a spiritual practice affected you as an artist. Like, what changes, what shifts, how did that affect you? How did that affect your art?
The spiritual connection is always present in my life. I've felt always spiritually connected, but never been able to what I would call name the puppy. So I wasn't able to name that puppy that I was spiritually connected. I just always felt connection to something else, and always felt very guided to metaphysics and anything metaphysical, and have always dabbled, and for a few decades now dabbled with different forms of meditation and tried lots of different modalities to find the modality that suited my lifestyle and where I could feel most in presence. So I always think that finding what works for any one person is not a one size fits all. And some people could sit quietly in a meditation and some people can't. And then also, to go back into how it's changed, is that I would more say that I've learned that when I am doing the things that I am here on this planet to do, that Source really wants me to participate in, is when I feel the most connected to God, source, power, energy, and I can see it in my work. And that's work that's always the most widely sort of, even if I don't know about it, that work becomes a connective tissue to other people. So the book is a good example. Like, that book had connective tissue to lots of people. I would never know how many, but it doesn't matter because you kind of work through something else to get the message from Source out into the world. So currently, my spiritual practice is I'm in transcendental meditation mode every morning, and have been doing that since 2018. And then I always do my morning pages. So for me, that looks like 45 minutes, and that is every morning. And I am my best self when I can do that. If I have more time than 45 minutes, I live down by the lake. I go down by the lake. I am walking in nature. I am seeing the lake. I'm looking at nature through just childlike eyes, and I'm experiencing sunshine or rain or whatever's happening. And I have a dog. So my dog's there with me and we're just experiencing. And so that would be the final step to my practice. And then if I feel myself slipping out of center, I will go back into TM in the afternoon, anytime between 4 o'clock and 6 o'clock when I feel like I need a little bit of restoration or to come back to something with fresh eyes. That's another 20 minutes. So that's my practice. But I also say spontaneous prayers throughout the day. I'm also widely understood as like every day is a different day and every day you're going to feel differently. I don't always blast through 3 pages. Sometimes I get through 6. Like I really don't push myself. I let how my spirit wants to feel the day happen. And I can kind of judge what kind of day it's going to be based off of that. And last but not least, I've gone into sound therapy. So at night, I use my forks a lot. There are bowls in the house. Sound therapies become really important to me, and understanding that healing through sound is essential. So that's always happening throughout the day as well, is really being mindful of what I'm listening to. What's being put in the vessel? What am I ingesting, not just from food, but from listening, from seeing, because that's all part of how the body is processing what we're putting out. So I'm fairly mindful of that. That's a long answer.
That's amazing, though. One thing that I just wanted to say is that not everyone might know what morning pages are. I do, obviously, because I read the book too. But
right.
Can we talk about what morning pages are?
When KB showed 2 books off the top, one of the books was The Artist's Way, and this is by Julia Cameron. And right out of the gate, one of the things she I would say she looks at it as a non-negotiable in this book is every morning before you get into anything, before you turn on your phone, before you turn on your computer, before you engage in life, you are going to longhand, stream of consciousness. Here, I've got my book right here. Got books like this, and you just crank through your pages and you just write whatever comes up. 3 pages, longhand, done. And those are what Julia Cameron calls her morning pages. And that practice I started in 2008. And it's been a mainstay for me because the effective purpose of it is to dump out the vessel. Whatever's happening up here that's spinning around inside of you gets emptied out so that the most important stuff can come in and work through you and you're not clouded with all that nonsense. But I also find it's a really wonderful way to collect your thoughts for the day, because often something will come to light in the pages. I'll start creating a to-do list. A wonderful idea will come to pass. So the pages serve as more than just an exercise. They really, for me, they're kind of essential when I'm in deep work mode. I work out a lot in my pages. So that's what the morning pages are. And it sounds like a lot, but it's not, and it's worth it. 15, 20 minutes, get her done.
I love it. As you're talking about it, what I see clairvoyantly is like a little antenna, and you're tuning yourself. It's just like an attunement, some sort of attunement that's happening, which I love.
That's right.
So,
oh yeah, big time.
Let's talk about creative ideas, because as you're talking about the spiritual practice, one thing that I was thinking of is like these creative ideas. Where do they come from? When do they come? Like, I was curious to know whether your creative ideas come to you in the midst of your spiritual practice or after. And I was also curious to know where you feel like these ideas are coming from. Do you feel like they're coming from directly from source? Do you feel like they're coming from your higher self? Do you feel like you have some guides and guardians, spirit team around you, a gang that you're receiving ideas from?
The ideas always come from source. I don't believe it comes from my higher self. I think it's always source. And they don't have a specific delivery time. They're always happening. All the time. Driving, doing dishes, taking a shower, meditating, talking to somebody, looking at something somewhere. I have notebooks around me all the time because synthesizing something for work, pieces will come together that make sense. I'll see something out in the world and I will make a connection and I think, oh, I'd like to try that. Or And what I mean by connection is like, I'll look at the way somebody's used a material and think, well, what if I fucked it up and did it this way? I want to see what that looks like. So I'm always creating in my mind. But at the same time, there's this sort of loose list that happens. So in my studio next door, I actually have just Post-it notes with just random things that have bubbled up that always eventually become something. And the idea always comes forward in its perfect time. So that's the thing I always think about. Like, some people have a more formulaic way of connecting to spirit and their ideas. But for me, my how it is literally a way of being. Like, it's just a nonstop flood, and I just have to freaking sort it out. And then I have to channel it to where it needs to go, share it, because sometimes ideas aren't yours.
Yes. Yeah.
Sometimes ideas are wonderful to have for others. Sometimes inspiring other people to pursue something that they wouldn't do. That's another one of my favorite things to do is to give things away. Because when people get protective of their ideas and they feel like, oh, this is my great idea and I need to patent it and I need to this and I need to that. Ideas are for everybody. And if you can't make something happen, give that idea as a gift to someone and let them propel it forward. I would love if we all became less attached to the process and the ideas. Because in sharing that, you're building your own community of people that love to share with you too. And that reciprocal circle that goes between the two of you will always be. And I feel that way about people who have worked with me in the past. We're still deeply connected. People I still work with now, we're all still deeply connected and looking out for each other because we've got that.
Yeah, definitely. What you're saying too, it's also, if you're able to freely share ideas in that way, also what you're saying and emphasizing and emanating is that you're in a state of abundance, right? Because you're not worried that there's this scarcity of ideas, that there's more than enough. I've experienced that too, that flood of ideas. As you were talking about your experience with that, I was curious, have you ever felt like you had so many ideas that it was too much? Or are you always able to manage or receive all of those ideas coming in? I used to keep an idea notebook, because I felt at times that I had almost like too many. So I'd just start writing them down, always too many to execute. But like it was a way for me of trying to externalize the idea and then also discern which one would be the best for me to actually take action upon or create from.
Yep. All of that. I mean, there are times when it's just the ideas come when I need them. And then other times it's a surplus. But when it's a surplus, I often believe that there is connective tissue between the surplus, that it's not just 50 individual things, that some of them are connected to each other. And I need to kind of sandwich them together, make a little idea family from them. And then that becomes a thing. And the other thing that I think is important to mention with ideas is the concept of when the idea, source, bon mot, nugget, golden thread comes through and it's sitting there in our consciousness, and then we'll write it down. People get attached to something being not their thing. Oh, well, I just had this idea for this thing, but it's really not my thing because I'm a blah, blah, blah. And I implore anyone out there that often these ideas come through as little breadcrumbs from source to take you to a place that you've never been before, to try something new, to expand the garden of your possibilities, your interests, your abilities. And it will take you out of a place of quantifying yourself as just one thing, realizing we are all prismatic and we are all refractions of different things, and we can be all the things and we can try all the things. So in that light, in that prismatic light, we are not overwhelmed by lots of ideas because we know we could try them all, give them all. It doesn't matter. We're just here to refract them.
Totally. What you're speaking of too, it's interesting because that abundance of ideas, I feel like that's the opposite state of being as having a creative block. So it feels to me as you're speaking of it that there's something about your antenna that's very wide open and receiving. Do you have any insight as to what makes your antenna so bright and open and receptive to all these various ideas?
Maybe because I'm dedicated to it.
Mm.
Maybe because it's Deepak Chopra always says, you are where your attention takes you. Always starts everything with, you are where your attention takes you. So my attention is always on creativity and color and light. And, you know, through discipline, there is freedom. And so I am like a disciple. I'm a disciplined disciple of the creative life. And that is something that I've always been lovingly devoted to. And so because of that, my life is in service of being a creative person because that's who I am. And that's who I know myself to be. So I'm not hiding that part of myself. But often there are some people that incarnate into this world that don't accept those pieces of themselves and hide pieces of themselves. It's not that my antenna is more broader or bigger than anyone else's. It's just that I'm okay and I let myself be okay. Following my intuition, doing things differently, being different, understanding my life won't look the way other people's lives will look, and being satisfied with the fringe a little bit, because that's the line that makes me feel most alive. So I implore anybody out there, please understand that I am no different than anybody else. I'm not different than you, KB. I'm not different than anyone. I'm just having a different experience. We're all made of the same stuff. It's lensing it differently through our own little prismatic grasshopper eyes. And I truly believe that. And so this is just my experience. But I don't think I'd feel like alive if I didn't have my creative life.
I love it. Well, Tiffany, thank you. You know how much I love you. And I have your book here because this is kind of how we met, in a sense. Just for anyone that doesn't know, this book just dropped at my feet at an Indigo bookstore at a particularly challenging point in my life. And the title, as soon as I saw the book, I was like, this can be beautiful. That was like a message from Source to me in that moment. So there was that gift of that just moment when I received that message from Source through you. And then, of course, there's just this connection that has blossomed, as a result of that as well. And I just saw I have some notes from you to me, like in the middle. So I just want to thank you so much for your work in the world. I'm going to try not to cry in this moment. Just thank you so much for your work in the world, Tiff, and your emanation of who you truly are. It's serving. I truly believe it's serving more than you realize. So grateful for you. So grateful.
KB, I never forgot receiving your email after you found the book and the book found you. And I cried when I got your email, and you were making so much jewelry at the time, and you said, I'd like to make a bracelet for you. And I still have it, by the way, and I still wear it. My This Can Be Beautiful bracelet with the purple beads. And
I have it too. I made two, and I have it somewhere in my jewelry box too. Super funny.
But what you felt is what I was hoping would happen, with that people could have that transcendental experience, understand that the book's message really is not about this craft or this object. It's about this, and this could be anything.
Yeah.
And that this anything of this life that we're experiencing can be beautiful. And I think that that's the message that when we help others, we heal ourselves. And when I create something and I heal myself through the act of creating, I know that this practice can help others heal too. And everything I've ever produced is in service to creatively assisting others in their healing, whatever it looks like, that involves the creative spirit. So that's who I am, and that's what I love to do. And I am so honestly humbled and grateful that it brought us together, because you've been such a light and brought so many wonderful things to my eyes, table, life, being. So thank you for you and all of your incredible talents and the light you have shone on so much for me, adventures we've had, and this beautiful podcast that I'm so proud of you that you're doing, and you're sharing yourself with the world. It's divine.
Oh, amazing. Thank you so much, my friend. And we'll have to do this again at some point. So thank you for your time and your energy and your love. So appreciate you.
Love you, KB.
Love you, Tiff.